The Crystal Ballroom encountered. The Crystal Ballroom at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel sparkled with 1,000 lights, casting dancing shadows across the marble floors, where New York's elite mingled in their finest attire. Sophia Chen adjusted the delicate strap of her emerald green dress, a vintage piece she had found at a consignment shop, and tailored herself. She felt out of place among the designer gowns and diamond jewelry. But her work at Sterling Industries had earned her an invitation to the company's most prestigious annual gala. Sophia moved through the crowd with practiced grace, balancing a glass of champagne while exchanging pleasantries with colleagues. She had worked tirelessly for 3 years to prove herself in the competitive world of marketing analytics. And tonight was her chance to network with the company's top executives. Her auburn hair was swept into an elegant updo, and her hazel eyes scanned the room, taking in the opulent surroundings. At 26, Sophia had learned to navigate the corporate world with quiet confidence. She came from humble beginnings, raised by her father after her mother died when she was young. When her father remarried Rebecca, a woman with expensive tastes and a sharp tongue, Sophia found herself working multiple jobs to help support the family while pursuing her degree. Now, despite her success, she still sent most of her paycheck home to help with mounting debts that seemed to multiply faster than she could pay them. The mysterious CEO, Daniel Sterling, stood at the far end of the ballroom, surrounded by a small circle of board members and investors. At 34, he commanded attention without effort. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his charcoal gray suit was tailored to perfection. But despite his polished exterior, there was something in his steel blue eyes that suggested a deeper complexity, a loneliness that wealth and power could not touch. Daniel had inherited Sterling Industries from his father 5 years ago, transforming it from a traditional manufacturing company into a cutting-edge technology firm. He was known for his brilliant mind and ruthless business tactics, but few people knew the man behind the corporate facade. He had built walls around his heart after a series of relationships that had ended when women revealed their true interest in his fortune rather than his character. Tonight, like many nights before, Daniel felt the familiar weight of isolation pressing down on him. He smiled and nodded at the appropriate moments in conversation, but his mind wandered to thoughts of escape. The endless cycle of business dinners, charity galas, social obligations had become a gilded cage, and he longed for something real, something authentic, in his carefully orchestrated world. A moment of fate, Sophia excused herself from a conversation with the marketing director and made her way toward the refreshment table, hoping to find a quiet corner where she could collect her thoughts. The evening had been overwhelming, and she felt the familiar anxiety that came with imposter syndrome. She belonged in boardrooms discussing strategy and analyzing market trends. But these social gatherings made her feel like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. As she reached for another glass of champagne, her heel caught on the edge of the Persian rug beneath the table. She stumbled forward, her glass flying from her hand in a graceful arc that seemed to happen in slow motion. The champagne splashed across the front of an immaculate charcoal suit, and Sophia looked up in horror to find herself staring into the surprised blue eyes of Daniel Sterling himself. "Oh my goodness, I am so sorry," Sophia gasped, immediately reaching for the napkins on the nearby table. Her cheeks flushed crimson as she realized she had just doused the CEO of her company with champagne. In front of half the board of directors, "I am such an idiot. Please, let me help you." Daniel looked down at his ruined shirt and then back at the flustered woman before him. Instead of anger, he found himself genuinely amused. There was something refreshing about her genuine distress, so different from the calculated interactions he usually experienced. "It's quite all right," he said, his voice warm and surprisingly gentle. "These things happen. An unexpected connection." "No, it's not all right," Sophia insisted, dabbing at his shirt with a napkin, though she quickly realized this was only making things worse. "This is probably a $1,000 suit, and I've ruined it. I should go get the hotel staff. Or maybe there's a dry cleaner nearby that's still open." Daniel caught her wrist gently, stopping her frantic attempts to clean his shirt. The touch sent an unexpected jolt of electricity through both of them. And for a moment, the noise of the party seemed to fade into the background. "Miss Chen, isn't it?" he said, surprising her that he knew her name. "From the marketing analytics team?" Sophia nodded, unable to trust her voice. Up close, Daniel Sterling was even more intimidating than she had imagined. But there was something in his eyes that wasn't cold or calculating. There was curiosity and something else she couldn't quite identify. "I've read your reports on the quarterly consumer behavior analysis," Daniel continued, still holding her wrist. Impressive work. Very insightful. You've read my reports? Sophia asked, incredulous. She had assumed her work disappeared into the vast bureaucracy of the company, reviewed by middle managers and filed away without ever reaching the executive level. I read everything that crosses my desk that shows real innovation, Daniel replied. Your analysis of the emerging markets demographic was particularly brilliant. I've been meaning to schedule a meeting with you to discuss your recommendations. The invitation. The conversation continued for several minutes. With Daniel showing genuine interest in Sophia's work and her thoughts on the company's future direction, other party guests began to take notice. Whispers spreading through the crowd about the CEO's unusual attention to a lower-level employee. Sophia felt the weight of their stares and began to shift uncomfortably. Would you like to continue this conversation somewhere quieter? Daniel asked, noticing her discomfort. I have a suite upstairs where we could discuss your marketing strategies without the audience. Sophia hesitated, knowing that accepting such an invitation would fuel gossip for months to come. But there was something magnetic about Daniel Sterling, something that drew her in despite every rational voice in her head telling her to politely decline, and return to the safety of the crowd. I should probably get this cleaned, Daniel added, gesturing to his stained shirt with a slight smile. And I'd genuinely like to hear more about your ideas for the Southeast Asian market expansion. Against her better judgment, Sophia found herself nodding. All right, but just for a few minutes. And I'm buying you a new shirt. Daniel laughed, a sound that was surprisingly rich and unguarded. I think I can manage the cost of a new shirt. Miss Chen. The Sweet Daniel's suite was elegantly appointed with floor-to-ceiling. Windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline. The lights of Manhattan sparkled like earthbound stars. And Sophia found herself drawn to the windows while Daniel excused himself to change his shirt. When he returned, wearing a simple white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, Sophia was struck by how different he looked. Gone was the formal, intimidating CEO, replaced by a man who seemed more approachable, more human. They settled into the comfortable seating area, and what began as a discussion about marketing strategies gradually evolved into something more personal. Daniel found himself sharing stories about his childhood, about the pressure of living up to his father's legacy, and about the loneliness that came with his position. Sophia, in turn, opened up about her own struggles, her dreams of making a difference in the business world, and the challenges of supporting her family while trying to build her own career. As the hours passed, they moved from the sitting area to the balcony, where the cool night air carried the sounds of the city below. The champagne had loosened their tongues and lowered their defenses, creating an intimacy that neither had expected when the evening began. The moment of truth. I should go, Sophia said eventually, though she made no move to leave. The party downstairs had long since ended, and she knew she would have to face the consequences of her absence tomorrow. Should you? Daniel asked quietly, moving closer to where she stood against the balcony railing. The city lights reflected in her eyes, and he found himself captivated by her natural beauty, so different from the artificial perfection he usually encountered. This is complicated, Sophia whispered, even as she felt herself drawn to him like a moth to flame. You're my boss. This could destroy my career. Then maybe we don't think about tomorrow, Daniel replied, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Maybe we just think about right now. The kiss that followed was inevitable. A collision of loneliness and longing that had been building all evening. Sophia melted into his arms, all her rational thoughts scattering like leaves in the wind. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive, truly seen by another person. They moved back inside, and what happened next was a blur of whispered words, gentle touches, and passionate kisses. The businessman and the analyst disappeared, placed by two people desperate for connection, for something real in a world full of pretense and performance. The morning after Sophia woke to sunlight streaming through its unfamiliar windows, and the disorienting realization that she was not in her own bed. The events of the previous night came flooding back in vivid detail, and she felt her stomach drop as the full implications of what had happened began to sink in. She turned her head to see Daniel still sleeping beside her, his face peaceful in the morning light. He looked younger somehow, less formidable than the powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions. But the sight of him only intensified her panic. Moving as quietly as possible, Sophia gathered her clothes from where they had been scattered across the floor. Her hands shook as she dressed, her mind racing with thoughts of what would happen when she returned to the office. The gossip alone would be devastating, but the professional consequences could end her career before it had truly begun. As she reached for her purse, Daniel stirred, his eyes opening to find her preparing to leave. "Going somewhere?" he asked softly, his voice rough with sleep. "I have to go," Sophia replied without looking at him. This was a mistake. A beautiful, wonderful mistake, but still a mistake. Daniel sat up, suddenly fully awake. "Sophia, wait. We need to talk about this." But she was already at the door, her hand on the handle. "There's nothing to talk about. This never happened." And with that, she was gone, leaving Daniel alone in his suite with the lingering scent of her perfume and the memory of the most genuine connection he had felt in years. The return to reality Monday morning arrived like a cold slap of reality for Sophia. She sat in her small office cubicle, staring at her computer screen without really seeing the numbers and charts displayed there. Her colleagues chatted around her about weekend plans and office gossip, but their voices seemed to come from a great distance. All she could think about was the feel of Daniel's arms around her, the way he had looked at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered. The resignation letter sat in her desk drawer, typed and printed in a moment of panic at 3 a.m. She had convinced herself that leaving Sterling Industries was the only way to preserve her dignity and avoid the scandal that would surely follow if anyone discovered what had happened between her and the CEO. But every time she reached for the letter, her hand froze. This job was everything she had worked for, and walking away would mean starting over from nothing. Jennifer Walsh, her cubicle neighbor and the closest thing she had to a friend at work, leaned over the partition with a knowing smile. "You look like you had an interesting weekend," she said, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. "I heard you disappeared from the gala pretty early on Friday night." Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. But she managed to keep her voice steady. "I wasn't feeling well, so I left early." "Nothing exciting, Jennifer hummed, clearly not buying the explanation. "Well, whatever happened, you've got the attention of the big boss now. His assistant called this morning asking for your direct extension." The call came at exactly 10:30. Daniel's assistant, a crisp woman named Patricia, informed Sophia that Mr. Sterling wanted to see her in his office immediately. The walk to the executive floor felt like a death march, with every step taking her closer to a confrontation she wasn't ready for. Daniel's office was a monument to success. With its panoramic city views and expensive artwork, he stood with his back to the door when she entered, his hands clasped behind him as he stared out at the Manhattan skyline. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and complicated emotions. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Sterling?" Sophia said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel turned slowly, his steel blue eyes meeting hers across the expanse of his office. He looked tired, she noticed, as if he hadn't slept well either. "I think we're past the point of formal titles, don't you?" he said quietly. "I don't think that's appropriate," Sophia replied, clutching her notebook like a shield. "What happened on Friday was a mistake. It can't happen again. A mistake." Daniel stepped closer, and Sophia fought the urge to back away. "Is that really how you remember it?" The memory of his kisses, soft and desperate, flooded her mind, but she pushed it away. "Yes," she lied. "A mistake that could cost me everything I've worked for." Daniel's expression hardened slightly. "No one has to know what happened between us, Sophia. But I won't pretend it meant nothing. It has to mean nothing," she insisted. "I need this job. I can't have people thinking I slept my way into promotions or special treatment." "Then we'll be discreet," Daniel said, moving around his desk to stand directly in front of her. "But I'm not letting you disappear from my life." Family troubles that evening. Sophia returned to the small apartment she shared with her stepmother Rebecca and half-brother Tyler in Queens. The contrast between Daniel's luxurious world and her modest reality was jarring. The walls were thin, the furniture secondhand, and the constant stress of financial pressure hung in the air like smoke. Rebecca was waiting for her in the kitchen, bills spread across the scratch table like accusations. At 45, her stepmother still maintained the sharp beauty that had attracted Sophia's father. But years of disappointment and mounting debt had carved hard lines around her eyes and mouth. "We need to talk," Rebecca said without preamble. "The mortgage payment is 3 months behind, and the bank is threatening foreclosure." Sophia sank into a chair, exhaustion washing over her. She had been sending most of her paycheck home for years, but it never seemed to be enough. Rebecca had expensive tastes and a gambling habit she refused to acknowledge, while Tyler, now 22, seemed content to live off his sister's hard work while pursuing his dreams of becoming a musician. "How much do we need?" Sophia asked, though she already knew her savings account couldn't cover it. 15,000, Rebecca said bluntly, and that's just to catch up. We need more to stay current. Sophia closed her eyes, feeling trapped. The irony wasn't lost on her that she worked for one of the wealthiest men in New York while her own family teetered on the edge of homelessness. Tyler wandered into the kitchen, his guitar slung over his shoulder. "Maybe you should ask your boss for a raise," he said with a smirk. "I heard rich guys like to help out pretty employees." "Tyler," Sophia warned, her voice sharp. "What?" "I'm just saying you've got assets you're not using," he continued, oblivious to his sister's growing anger. "Rebecca told me about the fancy party you went to. Maybe you made some connections." Rebecca's eyes sharpened with interest. "What connections?" "It was just a work event," Sophia said quickly. Nothing special, but Rebecca wasn't fooled. She had spent years observing human nature, learning to read people's tells and weaknesses. Something had happened at that party, something her stepdaughter was desperate to hide. The business trip 2 weeks later, Daniel announced that Sophia would accompany him on a business trip to Chicago to present their market analysis to a potential client. The news sent ripples through the office. With speculation running wild about why a junior analyst would be chosen for such an important meeting, Sophia tried to decline, citing other commitments, but Daniel's assistant informed her that the decision was final. As she packed her bag the night before the trip, her hands shook with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Being alone with Daniel for 3 days would test every resolution she had made to keep their relationship professional. The flight to Chicago was tense, with both of them maintaining careful distance, while the air between them crackled with unresolved tension. Daniel buried himself in financial reports while Sophia reviewed her presentation notes. But she could feel his eyes on her whenever she wasn't looking. Their hotel rooms were adjacent, a fact that seemed to mock Sophia's attempts to maintain boundaries. That evening, after a successful client dinner, they found themselves alone in the hotel bar, the dim lighting and soft jazz creating an intimate atmosphere that was far too dangerous. "You were brilliant tonight," Daniel said, his voice warm with genuine admiration. "The way you handled Morrison's questions about the demographic shifts was masterful." Sophia felt a flush of pride at his praise, followed immediately by guilt. "Thank you," she said quietly, staring into her wine glass. "Sophia, look at me," Daniel said gently. When she finally met his eyes, he continued, "I know this is complicated, but what we have is real. I haven't felt this way about anyone in years." "You barely know me," Sophia protested, though her heart was racing. "I know you work harder than anyone else in that office," Daniel replied. "I know you support your family even though they take advantage of your kindness. I know you're brilliant and compassionate and stronger than you realize." The sincerity in his voice nearly undid her. "Daniel, please don't make this harder than it already is." "Then stop fighting it," he said, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. "Stop pretending you don't feel what I feel." The discovery the next morning, Sophia woke to find her phone buzzing with urgent messages from Rebecca. The bank had moved forward with foreclosure proceedings, and they had just days to come up with the full amount owed or lose the house. Panic seized Sophia as she read the messages, her mind racing with impossible calculations. Daniel found her in the hotel lobby an hour before their flight, tears streaming down her face as she spoke frantically on the phone with a bank representative. Without hesitation, he guided her to a quiet corner and waited patiently as she ended the call. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. "It's nothing," Sophia said automatically, wiping her eyes. "Just family stuff, Sophia. Talk to me." "Let me help you." "Can't help with this," she replied, her voice breaking. "No one can. We're going to lose the house. And it's my fault because I haven't been sending enough money home." Daniel's jaw tightened as he began to understand the scope of the situation. "How much do you need?" "It doesn't matter," Sophia said quickly. "I can't ask you for money. That would make everything between us about financial obligation, and I won't do that." But Daniel was already pulling out his phone, his mind made up. "Consider it a company loan," he said. "We'll work out the repayment terms later, Daniel." "No," Sophia protested. but he was already making the call. 20 minutes later, the crisis was resolved with a simple wire transfer. Sophia's relief was overwhelming, but so was her sense of being indebted to the man she was trying to keep at arm's length. The balance of power between them had shifted irreversibly, and she felt more trapped than ever. The confrontation of the flight back to New York was silent, with Sophia staring out the window while Daniel worked on his laptop. She felt simultaneously grateful and resentful, saved and enslaved. When they landed, she knew she had to address what had happened before it consumed her. "We need to talk," she said, as they waited for their luggage. "My apartment or yours?" Daniel replied, his tone carefully neutral. "Neutral territory," Sophia said. "There's a coffee shop near my office." An hour later, they sat across from each other in a busy cafe. The noise of other conversations providing cover for their own intense discussion. "I can't accept your money," Sophia said without preamble. "It changes everything between us." "It changes nothing," Daniel replied firmly. "I help someone I care about. That's what people do." People, yes, but not bosses and employees. Not men and women who have already crossed too many lines. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Then maybe we need to redefine what we are to each other." "We can't," Sophia said desperately. "Don't you see? Everyone will assume I'm sleeping with you for money, and maybe they'll be right. Maybe that's exactly what this is." "You know that's not true," Daniel said quietly. "What happened between us had nothing to do with money, and everything to do with two lonely people finding something real together." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "But how will I ever know for sure?" "How will you? Every promotion, every opportunity, every moment of happiness will be tainted by the question of whether I earned it or bought it." Daniel reached across the table to take her hand, but she pulled away. "Sophia, please, don't let fear destroy something beautiful." "I have to," she whispered. "I have to protect what's left of my integrity." She stood to leave, but Daniel's voice stopped her. "This isn't over, Sophia. I won't give up on us." As she walked away, Sophia felt her heart breaking with every step. But she also felt something else. A terrible certainty that she was making the biggest mistake of her life. The unraveling 3 weeks passed in torturous silence. Sophia threw herself into her work with desperate intensity, staying late every night and arriving early every morning to avoid any chance encounters with Daniel in the hallways. But even buried in spreadsheets and market analyses, she couldn't escape the weight of his presence in the building. Her colleagues began to whisper about her changed behavior. Noting the dark circles under her eyes and the way she jumped whenever someone mentioned the CEOs, named Rebecca had grown suspicious about the sudden resolution of their financial crisis. She cornered Sophia one evening as she returned home from another 14-hour workday. Her eyes sharp with calculation. "Where did the money come from?" Rebecca demanded, blocking the hallway to Sophia's bedroom. "Don't lie to me. Banks don't just suddenly decide to forgive months of missed payments out of the goodness of their hearts." "I took out a loan," Sophia said wearily, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. "From the company credit union?" Rebecca's smile was predatory. "The company credit union doesn't have that kind of money, sweetheart. But I know who does." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Your boss has been very generous, hasn't he? I always knew you had it in you to land a rich man." Tyler appeared from the living room, his expression gleeful. "Wait, are you serious? Sophia's actually sleeping with the CEO." He laughed, a sound devoid of any brotherly affection. "That's brilliant. Think of all the things we could ask for now." "I'm not sleeping with anyone," Sophia said firmly, but her denials fell on deaf ears. "Of course you are," Rebecca said with satisfaction. "And you're going to keep doing it, because now we have leverage. Rich men hate scandals, and mistresses who know their secrets are very valuable." The word mistress hit Sophia like a physical blow. "I'm not his mistress," she said, her voice breaking. "And I won't be blackmailed by my own family." "Family helps family," Rebecca replied coldly. "And you've been very selfish lately, keeping all that potential to yourself." The betrayal the next morning. Sophia arrived at work to find the office buzzing with unusual energy. Clusters of employees whispered in corners, their conversations stopping abruptly whenever she approached. Jennifer Walsh looked uncomfortable when Sophia asked what was happening. "There's a rumor going around," Jennifer said reluctantly. "Someone leaked information about your relationship with Mr. Sterling to that gossip blogger who covers Manhattan business circles." The post went live this morning. Sophia's blood turned to ice. She rushed to her computer and pulled up the blog, her heart sinking as she read the headline. Sterling Industries CEO's secret office romance exposed. The article was full of salacious details, some accurate and others wildly exaggerated, painting her as an opportunistic employee who had seduced her boss for financial gain. The piece described their Chicago business trip, the mysterious payment of her family's debts, and even included a grainy photo of them holding hands in the hotel bar. At the bottom of the article was a quote from an anonymous family source that made Sophia's stomach lurch with recognition. Sophia has always been ambitious. The source was quoted as saying, "She knew exactly what she was doing when she set her sights on Daniel Sterling. She's not the innocent victim she pretends to be." The words were Rebecca's. Sophia realized with dawning horror. Her own stepmother had betrayed her for whatever payment the blogger had offered. The confrontation within an hour. Sophia was summoned to the executive conference room where the company's board of directors waited with grim expressions. Daniel sat at the head of the table, his face a mask of controlled fury. Though whether directed at her or the situation, she couldn't tell. Board Chairman Harold Morrison cleared his throat. "Miss Chen, I'm sure you're aware of the allegations circulating about your relationship with our CEO. This puts the company in a very difficult position." "The allegations are greatly exaggerated," Sophia said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Mr. Sterling and I have maintained a professional relationship." "Professional. Relationships don't typically involve luxury hotel suites in Chicago," Morrison replied dryly. "Or mysterious financial transactions that coincidentally resolve an employee's family debts." Sophia felt her face burn with shame, but she lifted her chin defiantly. "My personal finances are not the board's concern. They are when they suggest propriety between an employee and the CEO," another board member interjected. "This scandal reflects poorly on all of us." Daniel finally spoke, his voice cut glass. "This meeting is over. Everyone out except Miss Chen." The board members filed out reluctantly, leaving Sophia alone with the man she had tried so desperately to avoid. The silence stretched between them, heavy with accusation and hurt. "Did you leak this story?" Daniel asked quietly. The question hit Sophia like a slap. "How can you even ask me that?" "Because someone with intimate knowledge of our private moments gave information to that blogger," Daniel replied, his eyes never leaving her face. "Someone who knew about the hotel bar, about the money I sent to save your house." "It wasn't me," Sophia said, tears threatening to spill over. "It was Rebecca, my stepmother. She figured it out and sold the story." Daniel's expression softened slightly, but the damage was done. "It doesn't matter who leaked it now. The story is out there. So what happens next?" Sophia asked, though she already knew the answer. "The board wants your resignation," Daniel said heavily. "They think it's the only way to contain the scandal." Sophia nodded, unsurprised. "I'll clean out my desk today." "No," Daniel said firmly. "You won't." "The stand, what do you mean?" Sophia asked, confused. Daniel stood and moved to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "I mean, I'm not letting them sacrifice you to protect the company's reputation. Not when this is my fault." "Daniel, please don't make this harder than it has to be," Sophia pleaded. "Let me go. It's better for everyone." "Better for everyone except me," Daniel replied, turning to face her. "Do you know what I realized while sitting in that meeting, listening to them discuss you, like you were some kind of liability to be discarded?" Sophia shook her head, afraid to speak. "I realized that I'm in love with you," Daniel said simply. "Completely, irrevocably in love. And I don't care who knows it." The confession hung in the air between them like a bridge neither had expected to cross. Sophia felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling, her heart breaking and healing simultaneously. "You can't love me," she whispered. "I'm all wrong for you. I come with debt and dysfunction and a family that will bleed you dry. You also come with intelligence and integrity and a heart bigger than anyone else I've ever known," Daniel replied, crossing to where she stood. "You think I care about your stepmother's greed or your brother's laziness? You think any of that changes how I feel when you smile at me?" "The board will never accept this," Sophia said weakly, even as she felt herself leaning into his warmth. "The board works for me, not the other way around," Daniel said firmly. "And if they don't like it, they can find new jobs. The resolution that afternoon. Daniel called an emergency meeting of all Sterling Industries employees. The main auditorium was packed as he took the stage, his presence commanding immediate silence. "I'm sure many of you have seen the gossip circulating about my personal life," Daniel began, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "Rather than let rumors and speculation continue to disrupt our workplace, I want to address the situation directly." He paused. Finding Sophia in the crowd where she sat in the back row, her face pale but determined. "Sophia Chen is one of the most talented analysts this company has ever employed," Daniel continued. "Her work on our market expansion projects has been exemplary. And any suggestion that her success is based on anything other than merit is both false and insulting." Murmurs rippled through the audience as Daniel's meaning became clear. That said, "I want to be transparent about my feelings for Miss Chen. Yes, we have developed a personal relationship. Yes, I care about her deeply. And no, I won't apologize for that or allow anyone to suggest she should be penalized because of it." The auditorium fell silent as Daniel's declaration sank in. In the back row, Sophia felt tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by his public defense of her. Sterling Industries has always prided itself on being a company that values talent over politics. Merit over gossip, Daniel concluded. "Anyone who has a problem with my personal choices is welcome to submit their resignation. Otherwise, I suggest we all return to the business of building this company's future." New beginnings. 6 months later. Sophia stood in the lobby of a different building, this one housing her own marketing consulting firm. The company Daniel had helped her start was already showing promise. With several major clients and a small but dedicated team of employees, she had moved out of Rebecca's apartment after her stepmother's betrayal, finally cutting ties with the toxic relationship that had drained her for years. Tyler had initially been angry about losing his meal ticket, but eventually found his own path as a session musician for recording studios. The morning sun streamed through the office windows as Sophia reviewed client proposals. Her mind sharp and focused in a way it hadn't been when she was constantly worried about family drama and workplace gossip. "Working hard already?" a familiar voice said from behind her. Sophia turned to find Daniel in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the soft smile she had fallen in love with. "Someone taught me the value of dedication," she replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Smart teacher," Daniel said, pulling her into his arms. "Any regrets about leaving Sterling Industries?" "Only one," Sophia said, looking up into his eyes. "I regret not trusting you sooner." "Not trusting us. We had to find our own way," Daniel replied, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Sometimes the best things are worth fighting for." As they stood together in the morning light, surrounded by the evidence of Sophia's growing success and their shared future, both knew they had found something rare and precious. Love that had survived scandal, family betrayal, and corporate politics was strong enough to survive anything. The gossip had faded, placed by respect for Sophia's professional achievements and admiration for Daniel's unwavering support. Their relationship had been tested by fire and emerged stronger, built on a foundation of mutual respect, genuine affection, and hard-won trust. In the end, love had indeed conquered all, proving that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the messiest complications and the bravest leaps of faith.